Hi, my name is Charlotte, and this channel is about my attempt to become moderately competent at art. I'm starting out the year working on 4 topics: drawing portraits, drawing the human figure, learning to use digital tools for drawing and painting, and expanding my drawing skills and visual library more generally. This week I'll be talking about how my portrait drawing practice is going after I restarted it back in December. You can hear the whole backstory of my portrait drawing adventures so far in my starting point video, which I'll link in the description box below. But the most important thing to know is that I started out here and ended up here over the last several years. But I haven't really made a lot of forward progress since that second portrait, which I drew towards the end of 2021. When I picked up my pencil after my last video, I knew I was going to be really rusty and it was going to take a while to get back into the swing of things. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. This year, my only initial plan was to just start doing some drawings and see where that took me. I knew I was going to get pretty frustrated pretty quickly because that's been the pattern of all of my previous attempts. But this time I was determined to try and figure out where that frustration was coming from and build a plan so that I could push past it and keep going. So let's move on to the sketchbook part of this video. Some disclaimers before I do this. This isn't an aesthetically pleasing sketchbook. It's really a working, learning sketchbook. So a lot of the pages are pretty ugly, a lot of the drawings are pretty terrible, and there are some, as I said in my last video, very creepy faces in the mix. I also tend to write a lot of scribbly notes to myself all over everything, and overall this just isn't a beautiful sketchbook. In showing it to you, I'm also consciously trying to be positive a lot of the time. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first is, I think it's really important to find things to be positive about in your work, especially when you're mostly overwhelmed with how many negatives there are or how many places you need to improve. I think it's good to pick out little things that you did right this time. And the second main reason is a little more trivial, which is just that I don't like watching sketchbook tours where the artist is constantly dunking on their work. I find it kind of depressing and upsetting to see someone so angry and upset by their own work all the time. So I'm going to choose to be, yes, critical and try to be constructive in that criticism, but generally optimistic and upbeat. So sometimes you might think that, my work doesn't really merit any positive notes, but that's why I'm doing it. Okay, and over to the sketchbook setup. Okay, before we start, a word on materials. This sketchbook is a B5 sketchbook from AliExpress, which was very inexpensive. When you see me using pencil, I'm generally just using any old HB or occasionally 2B pencil. And when I start using ballpoint pen, I have some options. My favorite ballpoint pen are actually these round stick pens by Bic, especially these purple ones. But unfortunately, they don't really work well with this paper. So I switched over to some other brands. I really like the Bic Cristal 1.6 millimeter pens. These are a wider nib than usual, and this seems to work much better with this paper. I also like these Zebra medium retractable pens, and also these extremely inexpensive supermarket brand pens that I picked up a box of the other day while I was doing my grocery shopping. So this sketchbook I started in June 2022, and I'm going to show you some of the early work really quickly just so that you get a context of the type of work I was doing in the second half of 2022. So the first page you've actually seen before. I drew these mainly at the end of 2021. I put them in another sketchbook, which I ended up not keeping, and so I cut these ones out and stuck them in for safekeeping. And the same with this one. This is another one that is stuck in. I will say that this is probably the best pair of lips and 3/4 that I've ever drawn. So after this, there are about 15 spreads of what I was doing in mid-2022. And that is a combination of feature practice. Here's some noses, some eyes, and then these little pencil lay-ins of faces. So here's a couple of profiles. And so this carries on for quite some time, a really similar process each time. Some features, some faces. And I'm flipping through this quickly because there's really nothing interesting about this. I just followed the same pattern every day for quite a while. And at this point, I'm getting frustrated, and I know because I start to write like extensive notes to self, which is what's hiding underneath this piece of paper. I do like this shadow shape that I did with this particular portrait, but that's really all there is that was kind of worth talking about. Then I carried on with these same kind of lay-ins, looking at how they're doing. And then I did some more notes, and then I decided I would start iterating. So I would draw the head several times, which went very badly on this page, but better on these pages and on these pages. But at this point, I was really, really frustrated. And looking back, I'm not actually sure what it was exactly that I thought I was going to achieve with this process. I'm sure I had a plan, I just don't remember what it was. But whatever it was wasn't working for me, and I, at that point, abandoned it. And I didn't come back to drawing faces until November. So this is the 20th of July. And this is November. As you can see, really rusty, really struggling to get back into it. Decided to do some skull studies. So a couple of pages of that, really struggling, as always, with the 3/4 view. And then another page full of notes. And this time, this was where I decided, I'm actually going to do something different. I'm going to approach this differently, and this is when I decided to do my first video, which was about portraits. And then this is where I start again. So this is all the new work starting on the 27th of December. But unfortunately, I started out doing exactly what I did during earlier in the year when I was doing these some features, some simple lay-ins in pencil. But I was also thinking about what kind of resources do I have that I could start to use? And one of those resources was this book by Jake Spicer, which I already owned. And here you can see me taking some notes about that book and then trying to use what I'd learned to draw a face, not very effectively. And then back to that same process again. Features, little pencil faces, noses, pencil faces. And this is where things change a little. So this was me, again, going back to what other resources do I have? And I had a set of classes by an artist called France Van Stone, and she did one on drawing eyes. So I had this series of little short classes on drawing eyes, and I followed first the pencil one, and then I did the one on drawing eyes in ballpoint. And at this point, I had kind of an aha moment, and it's a really dumb aha moment, but it is what it is. Like, this was the moment when I realized that if I want to draw in ballpoint this year, I need to be drawing in ballpoint from the start. So from this point on, you're going to see mainly ballpoint, and when I go into pencil, I use Col-Erase, and that's just because it doesn't transfer when I write on it. So there is still some pencil drawing, but it's for a specific purpose rather than just generally doing faces in it as well. So that's the first example of me using ballpoint in this book. And then on the next page, I'm trying to recreate what I did in that France Van Stone class with my own references. And they're clearly not great. And that's mostly because I haven't got really a strong sense of how to do value control with the ballpoint pen. And a lot of the hatching is really chaotic and messy, and that really sort of destroys the illusion of the drawing. But doing these really helped me understand what it was that I was going to have to learn. I think probably the best on the page are this purple one and this startled blue eye. But I also really liked, I drew an eye from a model of Asian descent, and I really liked how the epicanthal fold turned out on their eye. So that was the first time that I was doing ballpoint work. Here's a little bit of a more graphite as I was doing glosses on and wrinkles, also from this France Van Stone class. And then we get into the new plan. So this was my last kind of little head, and then I decided the 8th was when I came up with a completely new plan, and I'm going to go back to the seated head version of me to cover that. So this is the plan that I came up with. I divided the work that I wanted to do over the week. So on alternate days, I'm doing some feature practice and some actual portraits. So Mondays, I'm looking at eyes and noses. Tuesdays, I'll draw a profile portrait. Wednesdays, I'll draw mouths and ears. Thursdays, I'll draw a 3/4 portrait. Friday, I'll look at the planes of the face and the hair. And then Saturday and Sunday, I'll do more portraits. On Saturday, doing a front view, and on Sunday, doing another 3/4 portrait. If you're wondering why there were more 3/4 portraits than others, it's because this is the view that I find the most challenging, so I want to give myself more opportunities to practice it. The big decision, though, is the decision to simplify. So right now, I'm just going to draw portraits that are either straight on, in profile on either side, or in a 3/4 view. So no tipping forward of the head, no tilting of the head, no distracting items like glasses or hats or beards, or people with their hands on their faces so that it slightly distorts their features. And I'm also going to go for neutral expressions, no smiles or frowns, and mostly pretty easy faces, by which I mean not too characterful, not too far off the standard proportions, and not, for example, like a wrinkled older face. It's not that I don't want to be able to draw faces in every kind of position, really expressive faces, really characterful faces. It's just that I don't think that I can learn to do all of those things at the same time. So I've gone for a kind of subtractive approach, where I'm going to take out as much complexity as I can while I concentrate on just the first part of drawing portraits. Can I get these faces to generally look believably human, that look like they have some depth and a 3D quality to them, and that I can do some simple, at least simple rendering in ballpoint pen, which is something I haven't done a lot of before. So that's my plan, and I did try it out for the first 5 days of this week. So let's go back to the sketchbook. So this is the first week, or first partial week, of the new plan. So I started out on Monday drawing eyes, which did not go well, noses, which I really like this profile nose. I felt like that had gone well. Then the first ever portrait in ballpoint. So I picked a profile to do first because this is the one I'm most familiar with and therefore the one I'm most confident with. And I felt like it came out okay. It's obviously a human being, and the model I chose had a really strong nose that I thought was really interesting, and I felt like I captured that really well. However, I don't like the hatching at all, and I think the rendering flattens out the face. You don't get a really good sense of the planes of the face, how the face is modeled at all from this hatching or this shading. And I was just generally really timid with my shading. So that was kind of a disappointment on this image, but I was really happy that he came out looking like a person. The following day, I started looking at mouths, and again, as always, struggling in the 3/4 view, but I felt like this profile view is probably the best set of profile lips I've ever drawn. Some ears as well. My problem with ears is I'm fine drawing them when the ear is in front of me, but if I'm trying to draw one from imagination, I just can't remember what ears look like. Here is my second portrait in 3/4 view. This was much harder for me to draw, and I really struggled, as you can tell from the fact that I had to resort to the post-it trick to have a second chance at the eye. The replacement eye is not great, but it's better than the one that's underneath. But again, I felt like the hatching is really timid, and I don't like how it flattens out the face. So still lots to work on there. I do think I need to get over this idea that I'm going to somehow ruin the drawing by rendering it badly. Like, it really is the lowest of all stakes here. It's just a little drawing in a sketchbook. Even if I completely destroy it with rendering, it's fine. It's not really a problem. And so then the last day of this week was looking at the planes of the face. This is just something that I got from on the internet. And then I looked at hair. I really like this one, but it's very stylized looking. I have a really hard time with hair, so I feel like this is going to be a really challenging practice for me to do. And because I film these videos on a Saturday morning, that's as far as I've got with the sketchbook. I haven't had a lot of time to work on this, mostly because of the holidays, but I feel like I've made some kind of progress, even though most of it is mental at this point. And I am pleased that at least I managed to draw 2 mostly human appearing portraits in this time. The next time I talk to you about portraits will be in about 4 weeks. And so hopefully I will have done a whole lot more portraits by then. And I'll also have a really good feeling for whether or not this plan is going to work. In the meantime, next week I'm going to talk about how I've gotten on in the time I dedicate to learning drawing skills and expanding my visual library. I hope you'll subscribe and follow along, and if you've been learning to draw portraits too, I'd love to hear about how your efforts are working out for you in the comments below. See you soon!